So, but does it matter with the number of species? Does that matter? What is the consequences of losing species? Does anyone have a thought on that? Because that's a typical thing people would say. Yeah, but okay, we lose species, but what then? Does it matter? Yeah. Please, yeah, please. Yeah?
Well, they are part of the ecosystem, so it's hard to sort of see. Or I think you should ask yourself, instead of saying what kind of change will it make?
Yeah.
You should sort of ask it the other way around, like, because it is a part of the ecosystem, and it's hard to sort of evaluate what you actually missed when you miss that species.
Yeah.
So it has an important. Sorry, I lost my words. But it has an important role in the ecosystem that you maybe don't see or maybe don't think about in the first place. But so by losing that species, it can sort of like rearrange the whole ecosystem and affect.
Yeah. But if it's very rare, maybe it will go extinct anyway. And maybe it's not so important for the ecosystem. So yeah, but maybe you have some arguments. Yeah.
I think that's I think the way Solveig says it is also the best way to look at it, like as a nature point of view, but like from an anthropogenetic point of view, there's a lot of goods and services that we get from different species, and like plant species and animal species, and medicine. We don't know if species that go extinct maybe have very good properties that we can use for cancer treatment or other problem-solving things that we need in our society.
Yeah. And maybe climate will change, the environment will change. Maybe this will be a successful species in the future. Yeah. So that's also something. And it's also maybe about moral. Yeah. Could also think about this a moral question: why shouldn't they be allowed to exist? Coexist with us as humans.
Yeah. And I guess the value we talked about traditional knowledge and I guess traditional culture and valuing different species.
Yeah. Traditional knowledge means that people are in a way a part of the nature, also through their belief system, being these species are in a way integrated part of people that you learn probably from the IPBES value lecture.
I was also thinking that the ecosystem loses resilience with the species that it loses.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you have ecosystem services that rely on less and less species, those ecosystem services and the ecosystem gets more vulnerable.
Yeah. They get more vulnerable, especially when you lose many species. Yeah. Yeah, and you never know where the threshold is, where one species is not able to compensate for the other. Yeah. Yes, but to counter argue also that, say numbers of people doesn't say much, does it? It's like CO2 emission doesn't say much either. But if you look at also the rest of the living material on the planet, it's also a decline in biomass. So we are actually losing biomass that the sun is producing for us, together with input from us. And they have, in the IPBES, they collected all long-term series on vertebrate species. It's 16,704 different time series of animals, and then they calculated the decline of this, and then you could see that it's 68% decline in animal population monitored in all over the world since 1970. So we could say that it's not only the number of species that is lost, it's also the biomass and the biotic integrity is threatened. And this is, I think I've probably heard this before, but it's quite a shocking number if you think about it, that 60% of the biomass on Earth now are livestock, you know, of all vertebrate populations. So 60% is livestock, and 36% are humans, and there are only 4% of those biomass that is wild animals. And that is shocking to think about. How were we able to change things so fast? Yeah. So that's also something that is a bit astonishing. Yeah. But yeah,
this refers obviously to terrestrial
yeah.
mammals. Are there similar estimates, or anyone trying to do that for fish, like for example, versus wild fish versus farmed fish?
Yes, it is. There is. They have made planetary boundary for Blue Planet, and in there will be some numbers. I don't remember the numbers, but the problem with the ocean is that there's on 80% of the species that are in there we don't know about. So we don't really don't have a complete understanding of the ocean and what kind of creatures that are there. But there should be some numbers in the Blue Planet.
But they are then not accounted, at least not so much for in the IPBES reports.
Yes, but I don't think they have done this exercise. But they have a marine part in the global, but it's not very strong compared to the terrestrial part. Yeah, but they have a marine part in IPBES. Yeah. But the one that maybe is not so well explored either is the insects. Yeah. And there they have data, maybe some data they could use for this kind of assessment for the last 10 years. But from this they could, like monitoring series, from this they could estimate that 41% has been lost the last 10 years. And the decline in biomass of insects is much faster. So if it's something we should be worried about, I think it's this. Because it's very important also for the pollination of everything we eat from land. So in Norway we find we could fish maybe. But yeah. But so 75% of the world's crop depend on wild pollinators. And here is this I think is very interesting because this is apple farming in the Mountain Valley in China. And here, a person they have to hand pollinate. So they hand pollinate 4 to 10 trees per person per day. It takes an enormous long time, and it has been estimated that if we were going to pollinate the plants ourselves, it will cost $356 billion US a year. So it's enormous costs, and that's how also they get these numbers. What does loss of nature really cost? And the other thing that Sandra Diaz, who was the head of this report, is very always are communicating. It's not only that we lose species and biomass, we are losing the fabric of life. It's getting thinner, simpler, and more frayed. It's like a weaving cloth that starts to get to fall to pieces. And you could measure that to ecosystem area extent and integrity, size of population, animals and plants, distinctiveness of local communities, like how much non-native species are there, and then number of species on Earth and number of local varieties of domesticated plants and animals. Some of that is stored in the seawall on Svalbard maybe, but the problem here is that we lose also the variety, which means that we lose resilience for crop production for the future. And I can hear that some of you are familiar with the concept of ecosystem services here. Ecosystem services is very simply the benefits we as humans get from nature. And the first assessment, which was done, the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment in 2005, divided it into supporting, provisioning, regulating, and cultural ecosystem services. This is more like the ecosystem services supporting the others. So they have been removed from the IPBES now as nature contributions to people, because now they want to call it nature contribution to people instead, which is a bit overlapping. And I don't think we have time to go into these differences, because they are very small differences. But what they want to do with nature contributions to people is really to get away a little bit from the economic value of things and more towards what makes it a good life, related to what do we need to have a good life, yeah? So they want it to a large extent things or the concept not to be so reliant on valuation, economic valuation. So therefore they have changed a bit the concept. So you have the provisioning ecosystem services. Is the food, medicine, raw material, which you talked about, yeah?
You talked that IPBES, they want to go away from economic evaluation, but I have had other lectures, they talked about how economic valuation is used to make governments aware of the nature and its contribution to, like, for example, there was a lecture talking about he went to Mexico and helped them evaluate the economic value of the forests based on how the forest protected areas from the desert winds and made it fertile for food production, and then put like a price tag on that forest to make it very clear for the Mexican government that, okay, that area is worth this much. So can you talk, like, what's the benefits of them going away from economic
Oh no, they're not going away from it.
Okay.
It's just that they want a broader basis. It's this pluralistic idea again.
Okay.
Yeah, that it's not only numbers and dollars that reach people. It's also what makes you having a good quality of life. Maybe it's grouse hunting that gives, and it's very difficult to evaluate in grouse hunting. Like food is very little, you know, and the enjoyment you get, the cultural function of it, you know. So they want, in a way, rather us to focus a little bit more on the quality of life aspects, and not only the economy, because the economy is very important, but the reality is that if we are only focusing on what nature is in dollars, then we don't get that they call it motivational crowding. Then we start to think only in dollars, and start to measure it only in dollars, and all decisions will then be weighed up against other more lucrative industries, and then we will gradually lose nature. So that's what they call motivational crowding. So you don't want to only do that. You also want to, in a way, think about, is it possible to live lives differently in coexistence with nature, which is the vision of the Convention of Biological Diversity. We live in harmony with nature.
So I very much agree with that way of doing it. But I'm wondering, since this IPBES was supposed to be like government agreed on, and it was supposed to be convention, or you said it was conservative to reach out to governments. Do you then miss or do you feel like you will lose interests from the government, or will it create better grounding? I don't know.
Yeah, well, biodiversity has always had little interest from government, at least globally. Yeah, there are some countries like Costa Rica and Indonesia had a period where they worked very much with this, but like people are signing this agreement, but when the action comes where you actually need to change things to halt loss of biodiversity, one of the problem has been that people haven't really, there haven't been sufficiently evidenced, what kind of actions actually would work. And that has been a problem. It has been a bit vague also in the conventions of different sorts. And so it always loses then in prioritization with other goals, and which is understandable. And here we also have to think about maybe the difference also between countries that is not as wealthy as Europe and US and Canada. That we could maybe afford biodiversity protection policies, while you have other areas where you maybe have other priorities you actually have to attend to, just to meet basic human needs. And also it has something to do with the distribution of funding. A lot of biodiversity is in areas which don't have so much financial resources. So the rich countries actually are extracting resources from those countries, resulting in biodiversity loss, but not paying the cost to the developing countries. So that's maybe, it's not developing countries, but other non-wealthy countries.
Yeah.
So that's also a problem here, but I actually have that in my lecture, so I should continue instead of, are you with me back there? Do you know this from beforehand? Have you heard about this before? No? Not the global. Yeah, Sri Lanka is also rather involved in the IPBES, so assessments. So you have this provisioning services, and then you have the which is like the food, energy, material we get from nature, and then you have the regulating services, and there's nature is very important for flood control, and as you, Tamer, with your students called ASIM, it's mismanagement result of nature is causing like big problems for Pakistan. They had 1/3 of their country flooded 2 years ago. This year it went a little bit better, but it's actually mismanagement of nature that has put them into this situation. So that's a very important function that nature has, which you don't think about until the flood comes. And that's the same for many of us. There has been a lot of floods and droughts around the world, and this year. And you also saw the planetary boundaries. The green water is also reduced a lot, which means that we will have more drought problems. We will have more problems with the crops and everything. Clean water and pollination, I said, that's also nature giving us benefit by regulating functions in nature. And then you have the cultural ecosystem services like education, recreation, spirituality, and aesthetics. Yes. Maybe soon we should take a break. Let's take this one. Because this shows actually how that parallel, it's sometimes hard to put evidence that loss of species result in loss of nature contribution people or ecosystem services. That has been evidenced in a few cases, but then this evidence is not strong. It's incomplete in the IPCC and IPBES language. Incomplete evidence for that, but what is happening parallel to loss of biological diversity is enormous loss of nature contributions to people, with all the 14 different categories here, especially the regulatory, the pollination, the prevent the emissions of air pollutants, regulating of climate, which forest normally does, for instance, regulation of ocean acidification. But if you look at what is services that has increased, is really the extractive form of ecosystem services, which we take out from nature. It's energy, food and feed, and material, like what you use for land to produce different kinds of material. And that could also be land used for mining, for instance. So that's what we use nature for, while nature functions to actually give us safe lives and enough food on the table through pollination, could be jeopardized in the long term. And then you also have the cultural values there. So, and one more, because that fits very well here. And I said also that the IPBES is supposed to support sustainable development through their assessment. And they took it seriously in the land degradation report. I think this is a very good one, because it shows, went through all those targets of sustainable development goals, and then they linked the trends for land resources that these goals depend upon to those different goals. And you could see that most of these goals are dependent on land not being degraded. So if you're going to reach the sustainable development goal, you have to stop degradation of land. And that's it's all go for clean water, it goes for climate actions, because if you disturb or land degradation result in emission from nature. And you have, for responsible consumption also, you would need to halt land degradation, and zero hunger and poverty. All these are linked, with maybe exception of good health and well-being, because you could subsidize that somehow, but it has also some links here, clear links. So that's is important, but it's not so easy to put in practice. And could you tell a little bit about the Sri Lankan example, where you try to actually be ecological? And I think that was a very nice thing, but it didn't go so well. What happened really in Sri Lanka with the organic agriculture that you wanted to implement?
Yeah, before they stopped all the chemicals for the agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
But now again they are using, because like, without the chemicals they got a less harvest.
And also some factors like soil conditions, like soil texture, pH, EC, all these things will change with the organic fertilizer, because it was 100% organic. So it was difficult to even harvest the yield. So then they have to again stop it and use it as like 50-50 or something like that. But there is not a specific policy yet.
Yeah, because he made it he made it illegal to import artificial fertilizer. Yeah.
Yeah, it banned.
Yeah, it was banned.
Yes.
And that put you into an enormous crisis, food-wise. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's why did he do it? And so drastic, just ban. It was.
It's banned, but after this banning, there were different disagreements and some discussions with experts and other responsible parties.
Yeah.
But it was not but they didn't change their policies, and yes, politicians didn't change their policies.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly why they did it.
Yeah.
However, it leads to the food crisis.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's